welcome to a new episode of The Wake Up. My name is Spencer Walsh. On today's show, it's time to talk about which U.S. regions are most under threat with climate change and why they are, how to tell what could be up with where you are living. Also, we'll talk about the next director of the Immigration Citizen and Immigration Services, tickled the Hong Kong protests, and more. Bernie Sanders getting a little frisky at the press. We'll see if he has the right idea on this. Because the press has been, at this point, I think, any person can sit down with someone who's kind of a Bernie fan, who's been following this even a little bit, and they could probably point out several examples of some pretty big BS. And I will point out one for you later in the show today that just took place this past weekend, which is interesting. So we have told you, obviously, about, you probably have heard at some point, one point or another, actions by the Trump administration to roll back regulations to combat climate change. But it is not often that you get the reasons these policies were enacted to begin with. The future, according to a major new project out this morning from the Washington Post, is already here, and it is, in many ways, alarming. Stephen Mufson, Chris Mooney, Juliet Eilperin, and John Muskins, who examined more than a century of NOAA, that's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration data across the lower 48 states, they found that the major areas are nearing, that major areas in the country are nearing or have already surpassed the 2 degrees Celsius number that emerged as a critical threshold for global warming. And why is that number so important? Because in the 2015 Paris Accord, international leaders agreed that the world should act urgently to keep the Earth's average temperature increases well below 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100 to avoid a host of catastrophic changes. Why keeping average temperature increases below 2 degrees Celsius is so important? Well, the potential consequences are daunting. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that if the Earth heats up by an average 2 degrees Celsius, virtually all the world's coral reefs will die. Retreating ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica could unleash massive sea level rise, and summertime Arctic sea ice, a shield against further warming, could begin to disappear. Basically, these hotspots are chunks of the future in the present, says Daniel Pauly, an influential marine scientist at the University of British Columbia. And like Andrew Yang said, it may be time to move to higher ground. That's literally what he said there. And it's very, very, very dark. And, of course, there's things that we can do. It's a very, very defeatist thing to say if you're Andrew Yang. But still, these are definitely really, really bad areas. Today, more than 1 in 10 Americans, 34 million people, are living in rapidly heating regions, including in New York City and Los Angeles. 71 counties have already hit the 2 degrees Celsius mark. Alaska may be the fastest warming state in the U.S., but Rhode Island is the first state in the lower 48 whose average temperature has eclipsed 2 degrees. Other parts of Northeast, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, they're not close behind. They're not far behind. And the thing is, it's very, very disturbing because if you get past that 2 degree point, and then broadly, if the country gets past that 2 degree point, and if the world gets past that 2 degree point, then that's when it all really starts, all hell starts to break loose. And the reason why they say, we only have 12 years to turn this around, that you probably often heard many times, is that is the point when, if we don't do some drastic action, we're going to hit that 2 degrees threshold really for the world. And that's when things are going to start to melt, as I just said. There's going to be real problems that will be run and hide time. That's why we need something like the Green New Deal so quickly. So the average New Jersey temperature from December through February now exceeds 0 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which water freezes. The threshold reached over the past 3 decades has meant lakes don't freeze as often, snows melt more quickly, and insects and pests don't die as they once did in the harsher cold. So if you're out there feeling some flies, that feeling like you feel a little bit more flies than you normally do, that could be because they all haven't died because it's been a relatively quicker or warmer winter. Global warming is already here, and there are consequences we can only really begin to predict at this point. We're in the early stages, I think. The Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, the landmark global agreement, to try to hold temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius by slashing carbon emissions. And as the president has said, that warming temperatures aren't necessarily a pattern. I believe that there's a change in the weather, but I think it changes both ways. Don't forget, it used to be called global warming. That wasn't working. Then it was called climate change. Now it's actually called extreme weather, because with extreme weather, you can't miss. But no, there's people still use global warming. People still use climate change. It's not like that word has been banned, but whatever. It's just a very, very stupid take, and he still is our president. He's not going to be helping us at all. Let's just put it that way. And I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be much of a help at all in any way in this, because he's still at the mindset that he's really he's in the mental place that he thinks that once it snows, that's proof that global warming is not existing, which is something like that a Rush Limbaugh viewer would think. It just shows you that we are not exactly at the best point with him, and he's not someone who we can look for help, I think, at this point. Yes, with 420 miles of coastline, Rhode Island is particularly vulnerable to the vagaries of the Gulf Stream, a massive warm current that travels up the east coast from the Gulf of Mexico before making a right turn towards Greenland and Europe. The sea level could rise. Sea level rise would flood 605 buildings 6 times a year, according to the Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council Executive Director Grover Fugate. So that could be very, very rough. And again, floodings, extremely hot water temperatures, that could be our future in the very, very near future. Like, by the time people my age are, like, ready to go into public life. Like, it's just that simple. And ready to, like, have kids, start a family, get a job, etc. Like, we could be dealing with those catastrophes if we don't act super, super fast. So that, I think that's very, very important. But, yeah, wealth, education, age, and English language skills. That is some of the criteria that the Trump administration announced yesterday in its targeting of illegal immigrants, that it would scrutinize their use of public assistance programs using the criteria to help determine if those immigrants can qualify for green cards or even permanent citizenship, which hopefully, obviously, they can. So that's obviously very helpful, would be very helpful. So that's some of the criteria that they have announced that they're really going to try to use here to possibly at least tighten up the ship in targeting illegal immigrants. And pretty much what they say again: wealth, education, age, and English language skills will take on greater importance in the process for obtaining a green card. So pretty much how Americanized, I guess you could say, are you? As the charge seeks to redefine what it means to become a public charge. Seeks to redefine what it means to become a public charge, as well as who is likely to be one under U.S. immigration law. Through this public charge rule, President Trump's administration is reinforcing the ideals of self-sufficiency and personal responsibility, ensuring that immigrants are able to support themselves and become successful here in America, says Ken Cuccinelli, obviously from the White House. The rule change is part of the administration's broader efforts to curb not just the flow of undocumented immigrants crossing the border, but efforts to build new bureaucratic obstacles through the U.S. immigration system. The administration has slashed the number of refugees admitted to the United States, tightened access to the asylum system, and expanded the power of the government to detain and deport those lacking legal status. That's what it's all about. So that's it's a little random there. But the point is, that is what it is all about. It's about trying to, in the most effective, most blunt way possible, is just just the immigrants in general, slow them down. Like, when you see Tucker Carlson talking, he does not talk about illegal immigrants. He talks about immigrants. When you see Ann Coulter talking, she talks about the browning of America. She doesn't talk about the illegal browning of America. Like, the point is, it is immigration in general. It's especially the influx of immigration from the southern border. is what they have a problem with. They don't have the fact that the problem is not the fact that it's illegal. The problem is the fact that they want it all to at least probably stop if they've had their full way about it, but they know they're not going to get that. But limit it as much as possible. Anytime, and this is again the kind of thing that's really gets under my skin when conservatives say, "Do you want to follow laws or do you not want to follow laws?" Huh? Like, if you wanted to follow laws, stop changing the laws so it makes it harder for immigrants to come to the country. Like, I thought you said law and order, the laws we have or the laws we need to follow. And again, which laws do you want to follow? The ones that say, the ones that make it easier for Mexicans or Guatemalans and Hondurans to come in, or the ones that make it harder? And I think we know which way they want to follow, because like that's President Trump said himself, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. Like, it's that kind of mindset that he has taken in throughout his entire administration. I think we have been fools, at least not to make a bigger deal out of that, and the fact that they don't want this coming in because they don't want immigrants coming in. And make your own assumptions from there, but I think that is a clear base point to start, to convince and tell people that, oh, when a conservative tells you, oh, you don't want to follow the laws, that's what it is, huh? Yeah, just like that is the fundamental logical flaw in this case, saying that, okay, we, like, the big problem here is not it's not the following of laws, the fact that you want to stop immigration altogether. It's very, very important, I think. So, the New York's mayor office and immigration think tanks say just the anticipation of the provision has already caused large numbers of legal immigrants to abstain from seeking help through such programs, despite being legally entitled to do so, because they're afraid it'll hinder their ability to become citizens or remain in the United States. It's a very, very tough thing. Imagine being an immigrant at a time like this, especially in places like Mississippi where that big raid just happened. It is very, I could only imagine I cannot even begin to imagine the pain and the craziness that they have to be feeling right now. Wow. Yeah, so, like, anyway, wow. Yeah, we'll let that wash over you through for a brief second. All right, so, yeah, now we turn to global protests in Hong Kong. Protesters have shut down the airports, and thousands of protesters, they shut down Hong Kong's international airport Monday, defying an intensifying police crackdown as China issued ominous warnings that described the protests as terrorism and began massing a paramilitary force in the southern border city. The chaos continued on Tuesday, with protesters shutting down airport check-in counters for departing flights. The police are getting more confrontational. Monday's protest came in response to a sharp increase in the level of force employed by Hong Kong's embattled police. Hours before the city shut down, the airport shut down, two police officers elsewhere in the city pinned a black-clad demonstrator to the concrete, and one officer's knee pressing the young man's face into a pool of his own blood. It's very, very dark there. Fears have been mounting that Beijing, squeezed into trade dispute with China and approaching a nationwide celebration of the founding of the People's Republic of China, will soon resort to military action to quell the pro-democracy protests in the semi-autonomous territory. Chinese officials and state news media actively stoked those fears on Monday. Earlier, the Chinese government department responsible for Hong Kong held its third news conference in 3 weeks. It has previously not held a briefing in the 22 years since Britain returned the territory to the mainland. Not very good at all. Carrie Lam, the leader in Vietnam, was urged by Nancy Pelosi to meet with protest leaders and listen and act on their legitimate grievances, including withdrawing the extradition bill, ending police violence, and granting universal suffrage. The people of Hong Kong are trying to preserve the promise of one country, two systems. If we don't speak out for human rights in China because of commercial interests, we lose all moral authority to speak out elsewhere. And that's a good point. It's definitely a good point there by Nancy Pelosi. And again, it is really, really insane that the fact that, like, people don't realize, like, this is what they have really done in China, which is traded what is a relatively good economy for complete, total authoritarian control. And Lord only knows how long that will last before the economy doesn't get too good. People start not living the best as they always have been, because conditions in China, really ever since Tiananmen Square, have been improving rapidly since the Mao days. So, like, that is a big reason why they're so peaceful and so able to successfully